Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90s, your retro time machine back to my favorite time period, the 1990s. This week we're going almost 35 years back, hard to believe. We're going back to September 1991. Let's go.
Viewer warning. The following program contains material that may be too intense for some viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
Marathons, wrestling wars, and more yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
Yeah, this is our fifth trip through 91. I was 7 at the time and living at my granny's house. After we'd moved out of Kentucky and the bad situation that was there that I've talked about before, where I got a concussion, and just getting ready to move it to a new town. Although that's funny is because literally Granny's house is in a town called Newtown, but we're moving to a new town called Mount Carmel, and it's close to our house, and I'm gonna be starting another new school, but I'll get into a little bit of that in a little bit. I do want to mention I do have a bonus episode coming out. It's February 21st. It's a Saturday, and it's where I take Garth Brooks' studio albums, not the box sets or greatest hits or anything like that, but just the studio albums, and I rank them based on my personal preference, of course. And music's definitely been on my mind a lot these past couple months because I'm in the process of writing and recording for an album, my very first actual album of like all original songs. It's called Back on 90's Country. I'm almost halfway through the album, and it'll be available for, I don't know exactly when, but it'll be available on all the major streaming things if you want to add it to your playlist if you like it. Hopefully you do. Also, it will be available for purchase, like if you're like at wrestling or anywhere near me that actually wants an actual physical CD copy like it is the 90s. I'll have those, and I'll also have digital copies where I'll send you a link to the digital file and you can download all the stuff. Or like I said, you can do it for free on streaming. It still supports me. But if you do get the physical or the download copy that I sell, I will be releasing like 10 bonus tracks. I'm taking one song from each year of the 90s. Not like my favorite songs, just like songs that I've just decided. I mean, I should say that again. Not that they're not my favorites, but like I didn't go through and like, what's my favorite song? I just was looking at a list of songs that came out each year and which ones I really want to sing. But anyway, those are like I call bonus tracks because no way I got the money to get the rights to actually do these songs and put them on streaming. I ain't got enough money in the world to do that. So it'll just be for free. Well, I say free, it's part of the album, but it was going to cost the same thing anyway. I'm just throwing them in there bonus. Eventually they'll be online. But anyway, that's enough of self-promoting crap. You know all the crap that's on my channels. We want to get into what we're here for, is the 90s. By the way, if you seen last week, it was like another room with different lights and stuff. Just like I jump around, if you don't know the format of this, I jump around to the pick a different month and a different year. I don't go like linear. I'll sometimes like, well, I'm going to record out here. I'm recording in my living room studio, if you want to call it that. Just some curtains and lights and stuff. And my giant Megazord back here. I don't think the camera can give it justice how tall this thing is. It comes up to my knees if it's standing up. It's pretty cool. But anyway, Megazord has nothing to do with 1991 because, of course, Power Ranger wasn't out. But what was coming out at this time is the movie Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. The final one. And actually it kind of is if you count regular Freddy movies like being the end of the story, because the only movies that come out after this, of course, there's Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which is kind of like one of those meta horror movies before Scream did it, where it's like like this demon, like dream demon, becomes real and takes the form of Freddy to go after the actual actresses. And Heather Langenkamp, who of course played Nancy, and it's got Robert Englund in it as Freddy, playing the Freddy character, but also playing himself as an actor, and of course Wes Craven playing himself. But it's kind of, like I said, it's a meta horror type thing. And so that's not really part of the series. And of course, Freddy vs. Jason is, but it's Freddy vs. Jason. It's like not I guess it is kind of continuing the story, but in a different way. And then of course, before that he appears, just his glove appears at the end of Jason Goes to Hell, which, isn't a Freddy movie. And of course, the crappy remake that is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. That don't get counted for anything. But anyway, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. A lot of people crap on it. It isn't one of the best ones, but I wouldn't put it as like the worst. To me, the worst, if you're not counting the remake, is dead last, of course. To me, probably the worst of the Freddy movies is probably the second one. It was just kind of weird. Didn't kind of fit all the rest of them. But this one is probably like right after that. Like I said, I enjoy it, but they were advertising it's a 3D movie, but really the only 3D part is the last 10 minutes, which sucks, because in the movie where she puts on the 3D glasses, that like tells the audience to put on the 3D glasses, which I guess is kind of a cool thing, so you don't get sucked into the full gimmick of 3D, like for people that don't particularly care for 3D movies, or maybe it hurts their head or something, might not want to sit there an hour and a half trying to watch this. It's only the last 10 minutes. And it's kind of a cool thing. It's like a kind of a, audience participation thing. But just the weird Freddy sperm-looking, demon-looking things. Like I said, a lot of people crap on this. Of course, it reveals that Freddy had a daughter, because the whole time everybody was, everybody was directing it to look like the kid that was like lost at the beginning was actually Freddy's long lost son, but it turns out that he didn't have a son, he had a daughter. Kind of furthering the Freddy lore. But like I said, I like the movie. It won't go down as one of my favorite Freddys of all time or anything, but it's not one that I won't watch. Even 2, which is the last on my list, I'll watch, but that remake, never again, unless I'm watching like clips for like some reaction thing where I just go off on it. But anyway, I do, like I was talking earlier about living at Granny's house. Man, some of the best times of my life. And I think I've lived there twice, unless I'm wrong and not remembering right. I think I've lived there twice. And by lived there, I mean like more than like a month or so, not just visiting or something. But like I said, we were moving at this time. I don't remember the exact month, so I can't pinpoint it like I do when we moved to Norwood the first time. But I remember we were moving to Mount Carmel. Like I said, I had to start a new school because I'd started kindergarten in Kentucky. And then I don't remember if it was kindergarten or first grade that I was at living at Granny's. It may have been both. It may have just been first grade. But I was in second grade at this time, just starting it. And I remember that I was there for a couple months. It was Mercer Elementary, I believe it was. And then we moved to Mount Carmel and went to a school called Brantner Elementary. And we lived in these apartments. Sorry, excuse my frog in my throat. But we lived in these apartments in Mount Carmel. And I don't know like what they are. I'd have to try to find it on the map. Like I remember vaguely around the area it was. I don't even remember. My mom probably knows. But yeah, it was me, her, and Travis and Josh. And that's when I had some great times. Got my first Nintendo there. And we were playing the crap out of Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt and Friday the 13th. As crappy as that game is, and as a kid, I couldn't figure out what to do at all. It was just fun. I would jump, of course, whenever Jason or his mom would appear. But yeah, a lot of memories from that place. Of course, there was a girl that I had my first crush on. Her name was Cynthia. She sometimes went by Cindy. But I was like, we were in the same grade, but she was like taller than me. She was like a tall girl, and I was like in love as you could get in second and third grade. But another person I remember, and she lived like right next to us in the same apartment building, because there was like these different buildings making up this like complex. But I remember one of the other complexes, there was this the first bully I remember encountering. His name was Joey Pies, but of course we all called him Joey Peas, not to his face though. He was like I think like he's either a grade ahead of me or two, and he had a brother that his brother just like he just dragged along. His brother never really talked to anybody. It's like I felt like he was forcing his brother to be there. But yeah, and he had a crush on her too, and like told her, which I didn't have the guts to tell her, and she turned him down every time because he was a piece of crap. And plus, like his third graders or something like real relationships here. No, but it was he would terrorize the crap out of me. But I remember me and Josh and Travis, like I said, was too young. He's still in diapers. But me and Josh, and Josh at the time was yeah, he was only like 3.5, a little bit less than that actually. So he wasn't like old enough to really understand stuff and everything. But we would go and sit in these like bushes and kind of like hidden from everybody. Me and sometimes Josh and Cynthia, and she had like a younger sister too, I think. I think she was closer to her age than Josh was to my age. But anyway, we would sit out there and just, just play around. Kids play in the freaking dirt because like we're in this like bushes, and we'd always end up scratches all over us, and just doing what kids do. Playing with sticks, playing with toys. Stuff you don't see these days. People don't just sit around and play with sticks. They got tablets and stuff. But anyway, yeah, that was a lot of fun. But it wouldn't be long before I started meeting my real enemy, which wasn't Joey Pease. It was the bus driver, Mrs. Dickerson. And of course, me being the immature, which I was then, not now, of course. But her name was Mrs. Dickerson, so you can imagine when I heard that the first time. But I know I've talked about this before, but I don't care. I've terrorized this poor bus driver. But she also, she gave it back too. She wasn't just like, oh, like little old lady crying. She was a mean old woman. Not that me terrorizing her was right, but I'm just saying, she didn't just take it lying down. She, it's like every time I get on the bus, the looks I would get. I had to sit in a certain seat so she could see me at all times really good. Oh God, this one time I had a bunch of, I think it was my dad gave me a bunch of like baseball and football cards. The cards you sometimes get where they're just, they come from somewhere, so they're just a whole bunch of mixed in things. But the first time I ever seen I believe his name was Rod Dickerson, the football player. You can imagine me with that card. Like, I got it from my dad on the weekend, so, obviously we went back home. I went back home Sunday. And, where was I going? Oh, yeah, I was distracted by the light. But, yeah, I went back home Sunday, and he gave me these cards, so I, imagine me just sitting there, like, waiting for school. And I got on that bus and, like, I just couldn't wait to show her, like, it's your boyfriend, it's your boyfriend. And I showed all the other kids. She took the card away, threw it up, tore it up, threw it in the garbage. I'll tell my mommy. Of course I didn't, because if I told her, I would get in trouble for acting up on the bus. But anyway, near the end of that, like the next year, towards the end of 92 is when we moved to Norwood. And, I told everybody I was moving soon because, it was like a couple weeks till we're moving, getting packing and all that stuff. Well, the day before we were going to move, like, we were going to move during the weekend, and I think, like, something got delayed or something. So, Friday comes along, and I end up, like, really, really bad sick, like, throwing up. I don't know if it's food poisoning or stomach flu, virus, whatever. But I couldn't do anything but sit on that freaking toilet. So I didn't go to school that Friday. It was going to be my last day. And they knew that at school. And long story short, the weekend's over, I get the feeling better. I got to go to school on Monday because we hadn't, because of being sick, and I'm pretty sure everybody else was sick too. So, okay, am I getting a call here? No, there's a bunch of annoying alerts at once. Anyway, everybody was sick, so we couldn't finish getting everything packed and moved. So we're going to be here another day. So they're like, oh, go to school. Should have been out of school. So I go at the bus stop. She opens the door, and like her jaw drops, like, and you could just tell, even as a kid, I could tell she's thinking, please don't tell me they changed their mind and he's coming back. Please don't. And she's like, I thought you were gone. We had a party. And the kids are like, yeah, we had a party. Like, I was thinking, yeah, okay, yeah, you had a party. But anyway, I get on the bus and sit down, and I'm not joking. There was confetti under the seat in front of me. They literally had a party that I was moving. That's how much I tortured this poor bus driver. And she had to have been in her 70s, so I know she's not around now. I can't say for sure. She may be... she's just waiting for me somewhere. So on some bus somewhere, I'm going to find her someday. But anyway, I'm sorry, Mrs. Dickerson, if you can hear this, or if you can't. I'm sorry for being a little butthole and causing so much chaos on the bus. I'm sure things that my kids have done to me over time have probably more than made up for the torture I gave you, so we'll call it even, hopefully. Anyway, we'll talk about some music now. I like to go through the charts just to kind of give a lay of the land where things are musically. Number one for 1 week, plus all of August, and 1 week in July, so it made 7 weeks total, was the Bryan Adams song, Everything I Do It For You. I didn't listen to it then, but now it's like one of my favorite songs of all time. Just a beautifully sung song, just like one of those ultimate love songs that you can't really try to top if you tried to write one or anything. It's just a great song. But like I said, I wasn't listening to it at the time. The Promise of a New Day by Paula Abdul. I know who she is, but I've never heard that song. I don't think I've heard any of her actual songs. Was that one that, I don't know if it's called Straight Up, but that's like part of the chorus. That's the one I heard the chorus of. But and then I Adore Mi Amor by Color Me Bad. Well, Color Me, I don't know what the freak that song is. I've heard of Color Me Bad, but again, I couldn't name you one of their songs. But on the American Country Countdown, of course, my everything, since obviously country music is my thing, Brand New Man by Brooks and Dunn, their very first number one, was number one for 2 weeks. And I mean, they came out like blazing, like they won every award there was for duos until the end of the 90s, pretty much. Leap of Faith by Lionel Cartwright, I believe it was only number one. Really good song. I'm surprised he didn't have more hits. He was really good. Where Are You Now by Clint Black. It was number one for 1 week, and then also 1 week the following month in October for 2 weeks total. Clint Black, one of my all-time favorites. Of course, out of that famed class of '89, there's a stink bug. Those things are weird. I was wondering if they're called stink bugs because they're like stinky, or if you like they get alarmed by you, they stink on you. I don't know. Anyway, I tried to crawl thing here, but anyway, this was a big month in music history, and as I'll go into this, you'll see why. But the one album that was released for country music during this time is, spoiler alert, gonna be very high on my Garth Brooks list, and I won't spoil that list by giving what it'll be, but I already know where this song is on the list. And it's the mega album, the one that made him a super duper star, if you want to call it that, because No Fence has already made him a superstar. But this is Rope in the Wind, his third album, came out in September of '91. Like I said, major album. It was certified 14 times platinum, so which is diamond plus 4 times. Diamond is 10 million. So diamond plus another 4 million in there. Debuted at number one for his first time in history at the top of the charts in country and in pop. And he's the first country artist to do that since Kenny Rogers back in the 80s. It spent a total of 18 weeks at the top of the charts, by the way, too. The singles for the album were Rodeo, which only went to number 3 on the Billboard charts, which is, I think, what they go by. Shameless was a number 1. Of course, that's was a song. I remember him telling a story where he was part of one of those 7 CDs for a penny club, and then they send you one each month you got to buy unless you cancel, but everybody always forgets to cancel, so they get sent a couple and get a bill and then end up owing them. I don't know if they ever, those places, Columbia House and BGM Music, I don't know if they ever collected on anything they were ever actually owed. Probably why they went out of business. But, he was on the road and was part of that, and got a Billy Joel CD in the mail, and, Billy Joel's one of his favorites anyway, and listened to it and heard that song, and was like, I gotta do it, and, it's definitely more of a popper, it's a pop, rock feel to it, but the steel guitar in that, man, you can't tell me that's not country, and that was probably one of his first, I think, of course, Friends in Low Places was a major song, but it wasn't a crossover. I think Thunder Rolls was a crossover, mostly because they played his video a lot on MTV because it got banned on CMT and TNN. So they played it, of course, MTV always about controversy. They played it on there, and that got it some crossover play. But Shameless, I think, was his first ever crossover mega song, that was #1 on the country charts. I don't know what it went to on the pop charts, but I guarantee it was probably at least top 20, if not top 10. What She's Doing Now, another #1. He don't play that one a lot live anymore. I really miss that song. It's a great song. Papa Love Mama only went to #3, but one of his signature songs. And then, of course, the last song on the album, which to him is always his most important song, was The River, and it went to #1. Great song with great meaning. If I had to pick a favorite album track, song that didn't get released to radio, it's probably a tie between Burning Bridges and Cold Shoulder. Both really great songs. It was actually, there's another song on there called We Bury the Hatchet. And it's kind of a fun song where these people are always fighting each other. And they always, the old, not slang, I was going to say slang, the metaphor, bury the hatchet with somebody where you basically let things go, decide to start fresh, no more whatever you're arguing about. But he says the hook of the song is, we bury the hatchet, but leave the handle sticking out. That way they can find it. They're talking about stuff they did 10 years ago. Oh yeah, well you did this. Anyway, there was this line that starts the second verse. He says, I was kissing on Cindy. And like I said, that girl was named Cynthia and also went by Cindy. And I would play, because I actually got this album. It's like one of my first CDs I think I got. And of course, Grandpa Wally bought it for me, but I didn't have a CD player at home. So while I was there, after we got it, I copied it onto tape, of course, as you do. Play it and record it to tape. So I took the tape home because I had a tape player and just left the CD there. Come to find out, a family member had stole it at some point. So when I wanted to get it back, when I finally got a CD player, I couldn't. But anyway, that's beside the point. I had this on tape, and was, she was a fan too of Garth Brooks, and of course that part always came on, and her sister's like, "Ooh, are you gonna kiss on Cindy?" I was like, "Oh no!" Of course, I was like, of course, if she tried to kiss me, I'd be like, I can't imagine me in 3rd grade trying to kiss a girl. I'd be all freaking so awkward and crappy about it. Yeah, but anyway, that's just some fun memories of that. That was then of course he released a limited edition. Was it the limited series, which was his first box set, where his first 6 albums he put out with an extra song on each one, just all in a collection. One of my favorite songs of his all time was actually part of that collection on this album. It's called Which One of Them? And I heard an actual there's actually a first Garth Brooks album before Garth Brooks, but it's unofficial because it wasn't really released. It's just a recording of his early stuff that he was doing in bars in Oklahoma before he went to Nashville. And this is a song he wrote, and he was actually, I think this and Much Too Young, I think he was doing on it. If you can ever find that online, I think it's called Garth Brooks The Early Years. It sometimes gets taken down, but he does a lot of cover songs on there. But anyway, just some great memories from that album. But like I said, this is a huge history just in music general. Obviously, that probably one of the top albums of all the 90s, if not all time. But you also had, even though I can't stand her, especially that Christmas song, Mariah Carey's debut album, ended up being the biggest album of the year, and started her career off. Bryan Adams came out, like I said, that's Everything I Do For You. It was on the, I think, of the Robin Hood soundtrack, but it was also on his huge album, Waking the Neighbors. Nirvana came out with Nevermind. I mean, Guns N' Roses had Use Your Illusion 1 and 2, which had, of course, November Rain and Knocking on Heaven's Door. So, huge month in just music history. And even though I wasn't listening to anything but the Garth Brooks album, I can appreciate how big September of 91 really was. Because you got, Garth Brooks, and that starts the crossover of, country's cool again, there's everybody's trying. The Alan Jackson song "Gone Country" could basically be rooted in this, because once this came out and everything started to explode. I mean, I think it was '92. We had the country singers at the Super Bowl halftime show, which I guarantee will never happen again, unless it's just rappers that are pretending to do country like they do nowadays. But yeah, there's that explosion, and of course Bryan Adams had that mega song, like one of the all-time greatest songs of all time, and Nirvana came out. And I know there's a lot of people say, oh, they started grunge, or they were just part of it. It was Pearl Jam. I'm not arguing one way or the other, because I don't have a understanding as well as some people do about that. So I'll just pretty much if they didn't start it, they were definitely one of the first people that were in it and made it huge. And of course, Guns N' Roses was already big, and this is kind of, I think, their last big album where they were superstars, I think, in the early 90s. But yeah, just big month in music history. Video games. Of course, we were right in the middle, or beginning stages, I should say, of the console wars of Sega Genesis versus Super Nintendo. But at the time, the biggest selling game of the month was Sonic the Hedgehog, of course, for Sega Genesis. That pretty much made Sega from then on, and it's too bad Sega's gone now, because I really, really missed them. I love the freaking Dreamcast, one of my favorite systems of all time. It was so ahead of its time, but Sony had already had a market with the PlayStation. I think if Sega would have came out with the Dreamcast before Sony came out with the PlayStation, I think Sega easily would have beaten out Sony, and might not even have the Sony PlayStation now. We could have had the Sega Dreamcast 6 or something by now. But yeah, PlayStation kind of beat them to the punch there. Even though, they'd already come out with CD stuff for the Sega Genesis, it was just the perfect storm that the PlayStation hit. It was an all-new system. There was no adding, and I know I'm talking about stuff that's not in 91, but I'm just talking about, how I think Sega really could have led the marketplace if they'd have done things right. If they hadn't rushed, they rushed this, it was, and the reason why, it was because it was a war between its own self. It was the Sega of Japan telling Sega of North America what to do, because of course Japan's always, ahead. If you look in history, the Nintendo came out as the Famicom there first. They always seem to release the stuff in Japan before they release it here, both Nintendo and Sega. But anyway, they were rushing the 32X and the Sega CD add-on, and then they hadn't even gone through that cycle, and they're like, no, you need to get the Sega Saturn out now. And now, and that came out way before it should have. While people are still buying stuff for Genesis, and it just never took off. And then they came out with the Dreamcast, and I think by then people had just soured on Sega and didn't really give the Dreamcast the fair shot that it deserved. Sorry, I'm talking a lot about 95 and on, but I'm supposed to be talking about 91. You know me, I'm scatterbrained. But anyway, I do want to talk about the kids' meal toys, because this is always fun to talk about what was in the so-called Happy Meals, because of course McDonald's owns the trademark on the Happy Meals, but pretty much anybody calls. I guarantee you, there's been parents that have gone to Wendy's or Burger King or even Pizza Hut and like, give me a Happy Meal. Oh, you mean a kid's meal? Don't sue us, McDonald's. The parent called it that, not us. But anyway, McDonald's had Discover the Rainforest. It was a set of 4 activity and coloring books all about the rainforest. See, a lot of people, when they think McDonald's Happy Meals, they always think the movie tie-ins or, the figures or like the vehicle things, but it wasn't always that. You would always get a variety of stuff. Like I said, this month happened to be activity books about the rainforest. There's puzzles and mazes and coloring pages and learning facts about it. Really cool stuff. Burger King had a set of toys based on the movie King Ralph, which I've never seen. It came out that month too. Pizza Hut was still selling the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles coming out of our shells VHS and cassette tapes. So go them. I've been watching the coming out of our shells tour concert, the actual pay-per-view version, and it'll be released in segments over time on probably Facebook and YouTube, because I break it down because it's easier to do videos that way, and people seem to like shorter videos. I know these are always long because I ramble on for 3,000 years. But at the time Pizza Hut was still selling those. They sold them throughout like 90 and 91. They were so huge. I remember our mom getting us a cassette tape from Pizza Hut, and of course she ordered us, it was either her or Granny or both, ordered us the pay-per-view, watched that concert on the very first night, and it's such a memory to me and Josh. And then one final one is Hardee's. They came out with stunt grip geckos. You know those wall walkers where they're like the things with the long arms, and they're not slimy, but they almost feel like they are. So they stick to the wall, but then they start going down it in like different ways. Well, that's basically what these were, but they were geckos. They do flips and stuff down the wall. Pretty fun stuff. All right, now we're going to get into one of my favorite segments on here, going through the Saturday morning cartoon lineup and the Nickelodeon lineup for that same day. And that day is September 28th of 1991, the final Saturday of the month. And of course, being September, it's of course new series, and the new series begin, and also a new season for TV shows and cartoons alike. But we're gonna start with ABC. We're gonna look at their lineup. They got the New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which I was never big a fan of. Land of the Lost, the 1991 version, of course. It had been on the air for a few months at this time, but definitely one of my favorites. I remember watching this all the time. I remember seeing like the 70s version and did not like it, or the movie, which is based more on the 70s version, but I loved the 90s version. Darkwing Duck, definitely a classic. Beetlejuice, the animated series, of course, love that one. Hammerman, MC Hammer's cartoon. I don't think I ever watched this, but this is a time when anything in pop culture, whether it be movies, celebrities, anything could have a cartoon, and don't matter what it was about, they just slap their name on it and they come up with a script. The Pirates of Dark Water. I've seen a couple episodes of this here and there, just watching like old cartoon blocks on YouTube of Saturday morning cartoons, and not really a big fan of it, not my type of thing. The Bugs Bunny and Tweety Show, though, definitely a classic. Slimer and the Real Ghostbusters. Didn't really care for the Ghostbusters, really. I know, shoot me. But, yeah, I never really cared for the Ghostbusters and didn't really watch much of the cartoon. We move over to CBS. We've got Riders in the Sky. I've never seen that one. Mother Goose and Grimm, which is, of course, the fairy tales. We got an hour of Garfield and Friends. This is the time when Garfield and Friends was still making new episodes. Definitely one of the classic ones. Speaking of that, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the cartoon, we had an hour of that. We got sometimes they give the episodes on here. We got Michelangelo meets Bugman again, and Muckman messes up. It's a new episode. And of course, I've got the whole series on DVD now, which is great to have because you never know when something's going to be taken off streaming. Back to the Future, the cartoon. Was never a fan of the movies, so I never watched the cartoon. Where's Waldo? I don't know. I think I may have watched a couple episodes of that. Of course, I'm more familiar, as most of us 90s kids are, with the Where's Waldo books. And for me, 3 or 4 pages in is about the last time I could spot him. As it gets, as you know, or if you don't know the Where's Waldo books, it's this guy you got to spot in these crowds. Like with a red and white shirt and these glasses and a hat. And, each page as you go further in the book gets harder and harder. Well, 3 or 4 pages, if I'm lucky, I can find him. I was never the best at finding Waldo. And then Muppet Babies, definite classic there. I freaking love the Muppet Babies. I remember watching it on Nickelodeon. Never watched it on Saturday morning cartoons because for some reason I watched it on Nickelodeon. And, you know, when you're watching Saturday morning cartoons, you sometimes you'll have the channel you'll be on that you like to watch, or sometimes you'll just be watching Nickelodeon Saturday, you know, because as a kid, if you're watching cartoons on Nickelodeon, it's still Saturday morning cartoons. I should start giving the lineups for the USA Cartoon Express. They had a lot of good stuff. I've been watching some of their stuff on YouTube. They had G.I. Joe on there and some of those great ones. Maybe I should start adding that to the things to look at on here. I know you're like, yay, make the podcast even longer. Over on Fox, of course, I think this is the first year of Fox Kids. We got Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, based on that cheesy 80s movie. Bobby's World. Love freaking Bobby's World. It was one of the first Fox Kids cartoons during their Fox Kids days. Tom and Jerry Kids, of course. A Looney Tunes tie-in, but also kids version, just like they had the Flintstone Kids. That was a real popular thing to do in the 80s and 90s, is take these classic shows and then make the characters into kids. Basically what they ended up doing with Tiny Toon Adventures is, even though it's not, you know, Buster Bunny's not Bugs Bunny as a kid, it's like another generation, just younger. And then we got, speaking of Looney Tunes, we got Tasmania, starring, of course, Taz. This was, as you'll see in a little bit, this is actually the first season of Tasmania, I believe, or is it the last? I got it on my list of things to talk about. It's the debut of it. That's what I thought. I knew I had that halfway right there somewhere. Little Shop, which is, I think, based on Little Shop of Horrors. I've never watched that movie or the cartoon. Same with Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures. I know a lot of people like the movie, but I never watched it or the cartoon. And then on NBC, at a time they were still showing cartoons on NBC Saturday mornings. Yay, you know me on this channel, how I've complained that NBC basically, their Saturday mornings basically just became more about teenagers than anything. You can see a little bit of that here. But we start off with Space Cats, which never was really a fan of that. Yo Yogi, which is, you know, another Yogi Bear, another title for it. Just like on Nickelodeon, it'd be Yogi Bear and Friends on Nickelodeon. Captain N and the new Super Mario World, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Of course, that's new for this season. Captain N basically is like Captain Nintendo, and, you know, the new Super Mario World is, well, I'll just go ahead and talk about it now since I'm already talking about it. It's the third cartoon version of a Super Mario Brothers video game we've seen. Those are certainly popular. Of course, the Super Mario Brothers Super Show with Captain Lou Albano playing Mario, and then they have the cartoon. Those are classics. Pro Stars, I don't know what that is. It kind of sounds like a sports tie-in. Wish Kids starring Macaulay Culkin. I never watched that, but I heard of that one. Chip and Pepper's Cartoon Madness. I never heard of that. And then we've got Saved by the Bell for an hour. Back when Saved by the Bell was good. Before the new class or they went to college. This was the classic Saved by the Bell. So that is our Saturday morning cartoon lineup. We're going to look over at Nickelodeon now. And of course, we always start the day on Nickelodeon at midnight because thanks to these great archives on these this fandom website, they're slow as hell on my computer. But whoever compiles these is really thorough. Like sometimes they'll even, like I said, even have the actual name of the episode that came on then. You know, I'm guessing people looking in old TV guides and different stuff compiled on the internet. But it's really cool to see this stuff. But, of course, like I said, we start at Nick at Night. We've got Mork and Mindy, The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, Patty Duke Show, My Three Sons, The Donna Reed Show, America Tonight, which, again, I'm never really a big fan of any of these. Get Smart and Dragnet, which were funny. Now as an adult, I see they're funny, but as kids, I didn't like them. Alfred Hitchcock Presents, definitely one of my favorites. Anything horror related, you know I'm going to love. And Mr. Ed, always freaking loved Mr. Ed. Oh, yeah, Mr. Ed, the theme song. The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis again with the Patty Duke Show. And then at 6, we start off with our Nickelodeon lineup. We start the day with Lassie, because, of course, a transition from Nick at Night to Nickelodeon. Of course, Lassie, all generations love that. Then the Little Bits I never really watched. Eureka's Castle, one of my favorites. Always remember watching this at 7 in the morning. Man, I love that freaking show. Classic, classic. Kids Court I never watched. I'm thinking that's like a takeoff of the People's Court, which is really popular at the time, just a kid's version. Count Duckula, of course, another Looney Tunes spinoff. And while Garfield and Friends was a great cartoon and I love it, my favorite orange cat of the cartoon cats was Heathcliff. I was always a big Heathcliff fan because I always watch it on Nickelodeon. And then we got Inspector Gadget. Who didn't freaking love Inspector Gadget back then? Whether you watched it on Saturday morning cartoons or the Nickelodeon. And then, like I just said before, Nickelodeon's Most Wanted, Yogi Bear. And then Out of Control, don't know what that is. And Skate TV, I'm guessing, is some kind of like a skating thing. This, of course, this was before Tony Hawk's made skateboarding like super popular. This is kind of when it was getting popular. And then I was just watching this today, like an hour and a half on YouTube. Dennis the Menace. So the theme song is running through my head because, like I said, I just watched an hour and a half of this on YouTube. And then we got Lassie again. And then, of course, naturally with Lassie, you pair it with Flipper because, the saving the day animals. Then we got, of course, being the week on Nickelodeon, it's not always just, later on it became a bunch of Nicktoons. But at this time it was, they would have something called Special Delivery, which is where it would be stuff that they wouldn't normally have in their lineup. Like first they had Grimm's Fairy Tale Classics, which of course is, fairy tales kind of spun on their head. The Hare and the Hedgehog and Man of Iron. So it's not Man of Steel, it's Man of Iron. And the Hare and the Hedgehog, not the tortoise and the hare. Then we've got an hour of one that's called the Moonstone Gym. I don't know anything about that, but I'm guessing it's one of those cartoons that they, like I said, it was a special delivery on Nickelodeon. And then at 4, man, I love this freaking game show / variety show. You can't, not, oh, I'm sorry, I read that one. I was thinking it was What Would You Do? Wrong. I don't think What Would You Do was actually out yet. If it was, it wasn't this. I had it wrong. Sorry, it's You Can't Do That on Television. One of the original Nickelodeon shows, variety shows. It was all that before all that. And then one called Make the Grade, which I've never remembered. I don't say never watched. I do see What Would You Do coming up. Anyway, Family Double Dare, one of the greatest game shows of all time, not just of kids, and my favorite version of Double Dare. There's been a couple versions. Family Double Dare always been my favorite. Salute Your Shorts, the kids show, or the teenagers at the summer camp, love that. It makes me want to fart. You'd have to watch the intro to know what I'm talking about there. And then I was talking about What Would You Do, hosted by Mark Summers, the guy that hosted Double Dare. It was like a variety show. They would like interview people on the street. They would have games and contests. They would have these outrageous like things like the pie coaster and the pie pod, where these pies get thrown at you. Just a lot of fun on that. Welcome Freshman, I was never a fan of. And at 7, we get one of the 3 original Nicktoons, Doug. Love Doug. Then we got Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. Oh my god. Then we got Looney Tunes on Nick at Night. Because, of course, this is before Snick. So, the kids can stay up a little extra half hour, watch Looney Tunes with the parents that still remember them, too. Yeah, kind of a nice segue there before we get back to Nick at Night. Get Smart, The Donna Reed Show, Mr. Ed, My Three Sons, The Patty Duke Show, The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, and at 11:30 we end with Alfred Hitchcock Presents. So you have a fun little snapshot there to look at in history of September of 1991. Do want to mention the TGIF shows. Family Matters. They were in season 3, and this is the first season that they were the lead-in, not the lead-in, but they were the main show on TGIF, because they always put their biggest show right at 8 o'clock, to hook everybody. This is their 3rd season, but like I said, the first one to be in that spot. And there was actually a story arc between that and the show that debuted, Step by Step, which was second. They're made by the same people. But Urkel was on this rocket and blasted through the Winslow and ends up landing on the Lamberts' pool table from Step by Step. And of course, like I said, Step by Step, their very first season, first episode this month, shows how they got together. Frank and Carol were basically drunk and got married. And they find out it's sort of like the Brady Bunch, but the Brady Bunch was obviously seemed to be more to it. The parents knew each other before, and they're going to decide to join the family. And this one, there's no deciding. It's just boom, all there. So it is sort of like a family feud, Brady Bunch, but more of like chaotic 90s style to it. And like I said, that second episode, Urkel lands on their pool table and helps Mark with this science project. The sort of dorkier kid on Step by Step, and ends up doing the Urkel through the whole class, like the whole school. And this was like a popular thing. Like they were showing like do the Urkel, like this music video sometimes in between shows on DGIF for years. Perfect Strangers was in their 7th season at the time, and this was they had one more season to go, but this was the last season they would be on TGIF. And then the final show of TGIF was Baby Talk, which was season 2, which was based on the Look Who's Talking movies, but didn't have much to do with them, and the ratings were very bad for the first season. That when they actually surprisingly got renewed, I guess just because of the Hollywood connection there, they actually replaced most of the cast and the crew. So, I never watched the Baby Talk to see what tie-ins it has for Look Who's Talking, but definitely not one of their best shows, and like I said, it ended after this season. I'm surprised they got to a second season. We're going to talk about some books now. A couple monumental books come out this month. Stephen King comes out with his 3rd book in the Dark Tower series, The Wastelands. And I've never really talked about the Dark Tower series on here yet because I haven't had a month or year where that's come out yet. But the Dark Tower, it's hard to take. In fact, there's podcasts like hours and hours and hours and hours long talking about this, so I'm not gonna give you the whole thing. It's this like series he started with a book in the 70s called The Gunslinger, and it's kind of like a Western series. And if you're looking into reading the series and you're not a fan of Westerns, it'd turn a lot of people off. Like it did me, but I heard so much about the Dark Tower, it's like, okay, I'm gonna read this. Even though the first one has a lot of Western type stuff in it. And of course being called The Gunslinger. But it's basically about the main character, Roland, going after the Man in Black. And he's trying to reach the Dark Tower, which is like this tower where all the worlds come together. Because there's multiple universes and worlds, and not just places, but multiple time periods. And it's all in the Stephen King universe, as you'll see when you read through this series. And, he gets this group together called a quartet. And his thing is always, if Ka says it, Ka is basically like, I don't know if it's like God to them, but it's like, or fate, or something along those lines. But anyway, he gets this group of people. He gets Eddie, who's like he's like addicted to cocaine, I think, and all kinds of other drugs. It's like selling drugs, and almost gets arrested when Roland finds him. He actually goes in his world and like goes into his body basically. But then we've also got Detta, who is she is I say black woman only because to put it in the context, she like hates white people because she comes from the 60s, so obviously during that time definitely a lot of turbulation between the races. Not that I'm not trying to get all political or anything, like not that it's changed much now, but it was definitely a lot worse then. And I think a white person like pushed her onto the train, and because she's in a wheelchair. I don't know if she's paralyzed or her legs don't work, something. But anyway, and then there's Jake, who actually you see in the first book, Roland actually lets him die to go after the Man in Black, but then he comes, doesn't come back from the dead, but like a different version of him, but he's still, because he and it's weird because both him and Roland can still remember what happened, and there's of course their resentment. But anyway, that's his group, his quartet, and they're going to try to find the Dark Tower. And like I said, the whole Stephen King universe is wrapped around this. In this book in particular, The Wastelands, they go to this city of Lud, on the going to the path to the beam, or the path of the beam. There's these like 12 beams that basically hold up the universe, and the bad guys. The main one is the Crimson King. But all the the underlings of him, of the Man in Black, Walter, Randall Flagg, you probably know that name from The Stand. But they're using what are called breakers, which is using kids with like powers, like think of like Danny from The Shining, if they would have got him, or some of the other ones, just like these kids with these powers, to basically break the beams to try to bring the universe down because they want to bring chaos. Well, the Crimson King is supposed to be in the top of the Dark Tower, and I won't give away how it ends, but it's an epic series. There are so many tie-ins. Like, I could be here for days talking about tie-ins from books. Like, Pennywise is not a major part of the Dark Tower per se, but of course, Pennywise being one that everybody knows. If you know, one of those Stephen King's biggest ones is Salem's Lot. Father Callahan, the preacher from that, or the priest from that, actually shows up to help them out in another basically time period. It's hard to explain. You'd have to actually read this. I cannot do it justice trying to explain it. But like I said, all Stephen King, even Stephen King's even a character in this, acknowledging he's writing this book. So these people find out that they're actually figments of an author's imagination. But like, you would think like that would be the end of, oh, we're not real. But no, they might be figment of the author's imagination, but they still got to go on living their lives. They don't just turn to dust once they find out. So of course they all hate Stephen King for coming up with this story. And of course, this, like I said, is something he started in the 70s, but he ended up there's 7 books. Well, technically there's an 8th book that comes between, I think, 4 and 5, I think, is where it comes. It's more of like a story. Like, it doesn't like continue the story. It's kind of, that's why it fits between 4 and 5. But anyway, he'd started this in the 70s, did it on and off, off and again, on again. And then he had that accident in like 99 where he got hit by the car, and he felt like the need to finish the series. So, he came out with a bunch of, the end books in the early 2000s. So, a great series if you want to, if you like reading the series. If you've read a bunch of Stephen King books, prior to, when the last one of the Dark Tower was finished, you'll see a lot of tie-ins. And of course, books he puts out after that, he'll still put some tie-ins in there. Just a great series. I can't say enough about that. And then another one, speaking of great series, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I've said, talked about it forever on here. I was going to talk more at length about it when the 3rd book came out, because the only book of these that came out in the 90s was the 3rd book. It was Scary Stories 3, More Tales to Chill Your Bones, because the other 2 had come out in the 80s. And of course, this is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark series. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was the 1st book. 2nd book was More Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, written by Alvin Schwartz, and I can't think of the name of the illustrator right now, but those drawings were so iconic to us kids. They scared the crap out of us, but also made us want to read these books. And these books caused genuine controversy. Like, there was a librarian, like, on a not worldwide, but a nationwide quest to get these books taken out of libraries. It's not for our children. I mean, there was, they talked about death and stuff, but there was no, like, actual, like, photos of real things or any sexual content of any kind. It was just the scary stuff that scared some of these old people, and they tried to get rid of them. And a lot of schools did ban them from the libraries. Sadly, not ours. Thankfully, not ours. These books basically changed my life. Of course, Goosebumps came out not too long after this, and we all gravitated to that as the next big horror thing. But I mean, as a horror movie fan to begin with, I mean, these were the books that everybody was trying to check out. There'd literally be people standing in line when they knew that a kid was taking the book back. they would just be waiting. Guarantee you, at any time there was at least 2 or 3, if not more, people trying to line up to get to the library first. That was how big these books were. And of course, they came out with a movie. Didn't really care for the movie. I mean, there's not really much you can do with these. If you don't know what it is, they're short stories. Very short stories. Some of them are only a page long. Some are longer. Some are silly songs. I think the longest one was the one about the house that was haunted by, like, the poltergeist, and her stuff's flying around the room. I think that's the longest. And I actually have all 3 of these books, the audio version. I really like the narrator who reads these. I can't remember his name either. But he does it in such a funny way on the some of them, and creepy on some, and there's horror music stings, like, that type of thing. If you've never heard the audio version, you should definitely get them. But they did come out with a compilation of all 3 of these. The first one they came out with the all new illustrations. People did not like that, so they came out with the second one that put the regular illustrations back in. Because, I mean, the stories are good enough on their own. The illustrations would be good enough to just sell in like a picture book, but the two together, just perfect. And there's another like book related thing I want to talk about, which I was actually surprised. Like last week, I discovered for the first time that Maurice Sendak was a man after, like, and I even talked to my wife about it. She thought Maurice Sendak was a woman too. You know, Where the Wild Things Are and Little Bear. For some reason, we had it in our heads that it was a woman. I don't know why. Maurice is, you know, now as an adult, we realize that it can be both, but the way it's spelled, you know, as a kid, you don't know. But for some reason, I was expecting a woman, and when I seen the picture on there, it was a bald man. I was like, okay, that's not who I was expecting. But anyway, Dr. Seuss passed away in September 91 of 87 from cancer. And for some reason in my head, I thought Dr. Seuss was like dead like in the 1800s. I don't know why. That was just me. I'm probably stupid on that. Like I thought for sure he wasn't alive in my lifetime, but apparently he was. But enough can't be said about his books, you know. It's debatable which one's the more popular. Of course, you got The Cat in the Hat was probably his signature book, but also Green Eggs and Ham, and of course you can't leave out How the Grinch Stole Christmas, you know. Definitely thanks to the cartoon and the movie. I'm not even counting I don't even like the Jim Carrey movie, but that new thing they came out with, that computer animated crap, I've done a video about ranting about years ago. That don't even count. But anyway, basically thanks to that the Grinch became popular. We're gonna move on and talk about some wrestling now. Sorry, this is taking a long time to talk about all this stuff. There was no pay-per-view this month, but WWF did run their King of the Ring event. It was just a house show, basically. You know, it was just as you see later with ECW cards, where it wasn't. And this is different than ECW even, because this wasn't even televised. But this was September 7th in Providence, Rhode Island, and it was there was a King of the Ring tournament held just for this show, and it was the 6th tournament in history. All the other ones previously had been done, you know, off of TV. You know, you just have a character showing up, saying there like King Harley Race. Like, okay, he's king. You know, they mentioned, oh, he won this tournament, but because Vince's big thing at the, you know, forever is he didn't like tournaments on TV. He thought they were boring and slow, and in some cases they can be, but if they're done right, you know, tournaments can be exciting. But anyway, no, this was 91. The King of the Ring wouldn't return till 93, and that's when it was a pay-per-view. And the winner of that one is the winner of this one, Bret Hart. In this one, Bret Hart pinned IRS to win the crown. Like I said, he ended up winning the first pay-per-view version, which would be a June annual pay-per-view for a long time, and then of course they changed it around, and nowadays it's like combined with like some overseas pay-per-view now, and now the king and they have a Queen of the Ring now, and the winners of that gets a world title shot at SummerSlam, which is pretty cool that they brought it back. But yeah, definitely during this time Vince didn't care about tournaments. Of course, Vince ain't in charge anymore, so who cares? But WCW had a Clash of the Champions, which is like their TV special they do every couple months, or sometimes once a month, depending on what year it was. It would be bigger than their WCW Saturday Night show. And originally it was like every champion was on the show, but then, you know, of course that petered out eventually. This was number 16. It was called Clash of the Champions Fall Brawl. Of course, Fall Brawl became a WCW pay-per-view in a couple years, but this time it was just the tagline of this event. It was September 5th from Augusta, Georgia. The main event was the Enforcers, which was Arn Anderson and Larry Zbyszko, defeated Rick Steiner and Bill Kazmaier to win the vacant WCW World Tag Team titles. And the titles were vacant back in, I think, when was it? I think it was back in July. Yeah, back in July, because the Steiner brothers were champions then, but Rick had a biceps injury, so they stripped him. And, of course, Rick comes back with Bill Kazmaier as his partner. I don't know why, you know, he wasn't teaming with Scott at the time, but anyway, they won the vacant titles. And September 9th was the day, one of the biggest days in wrestling history, like biggest, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening moments. Ric Flair shows up on WWF TV on Primetime Wrestling with the NWA World title, you know, the big gold belt. This is after being fired by Jim Herd, and all that controversy. Flair just took the belt there. Eventually, they had to like blur it out. They weren't allowed to show the belt on TV, so he would actually come out with like an old tag team title and claim it's that belt, but they'd blur it out on TV so you'd think he's got the belt. But I think he shipped the actual belt back after he got his, because they used to do a 25,000 especially during the NWA days. Whoever won the title actually had to put a $25,000 deposit down that would be returned to them once they returned the belt, when they lose it. It was just so that way they couldn't literally take the title and go wherever they wanted with it, and screw the NWA, because there was a lot of backstabbing in wrestling. Always been that way, but especially in those days before contracts and everything made this stuff, illegal to do. But you get the $25,000 deposit back plus interest in it because, they put it in a bank account for you. Well, Flair was saying he was owed that from the NWA, and, Jim Herd was an idiot. Some Pizza Hut executive that thinks he runs a wrestling program. Trust me, nobody in wrestling history liked this idiot. But anyway, that's what led him going to WWF for, 2 years. Not even a full 2 years, actually. Like a year and a half. But a couple more things to talk about. I want to talk about sports. Of course, September is traditionally a big month in sports. It's the final month of the baseball season, but also the first month of the football season. So, in baseball, the teams, not just seeing who's at the end, who's at the top of the standings at the end of the month, it's, who's going to the playoffs. And during this time, it was the National League and American League split into the West and the East, not the three divisions you got now with, the wild card teams and 7 teams make the playoffs. Back then, only 4 teams made the playoffs. 2 from the National League, 2 from the American League. And those teams would be the Pirates and the Braves from the National League, and the Blue Jays and the Twins from the American League. The Reds finished 74 and 88th, and 5th place out of 6 teams in the NL West. And as you see, that's less than 10 games below 500. But they were actually 20 games back because, like I said, each one I think had 6 teams in each division, and only 2 divisions. Like, if you weren't those top 2 teams, you weren't getting in, unlike today. So you got to be like super good. A lot of people say that that's the way it should be. I like the newer format where you get more teams. It gives fans a better chance to see it, and I think eventually it all shakes out at the end. Even though everybody knows the Dodgers run Major League Baseball these days, but that's enough I'll say about today. The Twins would go on to beat the Braves in the World Series, and actually mark the first time in history that 2 teams that the year before were dead last in their leagues would actually make the World Series. So, a monumental turnarounds there. Players of the month were Howard Johnson and Cal Ripken Jr. Of course, Cal Ripken Jr., you're always going to find Player of the Month at least 1 month, if not more, throughout the 80s and 90s. Pitchers of the Month, Chris Nabholz and Roger Clemens. And some news of note, on September 13th, there was a huge concrete beam that fell. I don't know if it was concrete or metal. I forgot to write down what. But anyway, it fell in Montreal in Olympic Stadium, which was, of course, the Montreal Expos at the time, before they moved to Washington, D.C. to become the Nationals. But anyway, this caused so much problems, structural damage and everything else, that they actually had to play the rest of the season, their home games, on the road against the teams that they were supposed to be having home games against. So those teams got extra bonus home games out of that. Nowadays, they'd probably just find a field closer or something. But on September 14th, Cecil Fielder from the Tigers hit the only home run to ever leave Milwaukee County Stadium for the Brewers. And, of course, this was during a time when the Brewers were part of the American League. Of course, now they seem to be the top every year, sadly for me and my Reds, of the NL Central. But back then, they were in the American League. And then, of course, football, like I said, first month of the season, the records for this were after 5 weeks. For the AFC, the leaders were the Bills, which were perfect 5-0, the Oilers and the Broncos. In the NFC, it was the Redskins and Saints, both at 5-0, perfect records. The Bears and the Lions. The Bengals were last. Big surprise, Bengals in the 90s. Last in the AFC Central, winless at 0-4. Who'd end up 3-13, dead last in the division, of course. And then the Redskins would beat the Bills in the Super Bowl for the season. So Why did I get blurry all of a sudden? Unless it's my eyes, I think. Yeah, the camera got blurry. I was like, sorry if the camera's going blurry on me. I don't know what causes it. But some NASCAR news. Pretty historic stuff here. Harry Gant, the driver for, I don't know, I didn't write down what his sponsor was, but he drove the number 33 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, which you don't find in NASCAR anymore. He actually won, there was 5 races this month. He won 4 of those races, 4 in a row. He won the Heinz, I love the names of these races. The Heinz Southern 500 at Darlington, Miller Genuine Draft 400 at Richmond, Peak Antifreeze 500 at Dover, and the Goodies 500 at Martinsville. And then Dale Earnhardt won the last race of the month, the Tyson Holly Farms 400 at North Wilkesboro Speedway. Of course, number 3, GM Goodwrench Chevrolet. But despite that, the 4 out of 5 races, you'd think, oh, Harry Gant's probably going to win the championship. No, he didn't even, not even top 3. He was 4th. Dale Earnhardt ended up winning his 5th of 7 NASCAR championships that year. But yeah, heck of a run there by Harry Gant, but didn't even get in the top 3 in standings. So I don't know if that's indicative of like he had a horrible rest of the year, but during that short period of time, I mean, that month that was a crazy month. But before we get out of here, I do want to talk about TV. This was the 20th anniversary of The Price is Right. And actually, today just watched a episode from September of 91 of The Price is Right. Just reminded me of how good of a host Bob Barker was, how funny he was. He was so quick-witted. And Roddy, he wasn't the original announcer. There was another one, I think he died, and then they interviewed, and auditioned a few of them, but Roddy's the one they settled on. But he's definitely the one I remember the most, the one I had the most memories of. As time went on, his jackets and everything would get more flamboyant and everything, but his voice announcing people, come on down. I love Drew Carey, but it doesn't seem, I don't know if it's Drew Carey or just anybody. It doesn't seem like the same Price is Right, anymore. It doesn't have that same energy. And of course, it wouldn't. Bob Barker's one of a kind, but just watching it earlier really made me just have so much appreciation of how good we had it as kids. We either watched Price is Right when we were homesick from school or pretending to be sick from school in some cases, or during the summer. I mean, it was, whether you had cable, Nickelodeon, tapes to watch, you were always watching The Price is Right. I don't know if it was the same everywhere, but it was always on 11 o'clock on Channel 12, our CBS channel. Well, I guess, CBS used to be on Channel 9. Our channels in Cincinnati switched at some point. ABC and CBS switched from 9 to 12. But I think, so maybe Price is Right was on 9 for a while, but I always remember it, as a teenager, mostly on Channel 12. Anyway, sorry for taking forever about that. I talked before about Tasmania debuting. They had 4 seasons of 65 episodes. Daytime TV was really starting to take off at this time. The Maury Povich Show and the Jerry Springer Show both debuted in September of 91. Maury Povich Show actually ran longer. 31 seasons, 5,545 episodes in syndication. And of course, he became known as the "You Are Not the Father." That became the big part of the Maury Povich Show. And my dogs are going crazy. The Jerry Springer Show, 27 seasons, 3,891 episodes in syndication. I remember watching on Channel 5, Quit, which was our NBC's local NBC in Cincinnati. But I think the main reason it was on there is because Jerry Springer used to be one of the news anchors on there. And of course, he was also mayor of Cincinnati, famously got caught paying for a prostitute with a check. Not his smartest move. But yeah, originally this show was actually in Cincinnati, and it was like a topical show talking about topics of the time and news stories. But he would end up getting the other slimy, if you watched the documentary, I think it was on Netflix about the show, the slimy producer he had. They moved to Chicago, and the formats changed, and it just became all about shock value. And I'm not going to lie and say those shows weren't hilarious and entertaining to watch. But if you see some of the later ones, they got like really stupid, where they had the stupid comedian preacher on there that was always pretending to be drunk or was drunk, who knows. And there'd be like sideshow freaks, like tall people and mimes and clowns and the bearded lady just wandering around on stage. Like if you ever see these clips on YouTube, it's like too like out there. I wasn't watching by that time, but that was another one. You stay home from school, you're watching Price is Right, and you're gonna watch Jerry Springer later on. It was the closest thing to watching TV you're not supposed to, without nudity on there. Basically, of course, we always seen those tapes for Jerry Springer, Too Hot for TV, and we always wanted those tapes, which you shouldn't at that age, but hormonal teenagers, you know how that goes. Everybody was one at one point. But like I was talking about earlier, Super Mario World debuted. Only lasted one season for 13 episodes. Erie, Indiana actually came out this time, which I was surprised to learn. Only one season with 19 episodes on NBC, but I remember watching, like everybody else, a lot of people remembered it from 1997 on Fox Kids. It became like this cult favorite when they like replayed it on Disney a few years after it had been canceled on NBC. So they brought it back for Fox Kids Saturday mornings, and like it was a huge show. They actually spun off Erie, Indiana, The Other Dimension in '98, but yeah, I never even knew this show existed back in 1991. Another big show that came out this year, because of course September you get all these debuts because that's when the season started, like I said earlier. Home Improvement. I mean, massive show. 8 seasons, 204 episodes on ABC. So many classic things from the 90s from that. Tim the Toolman Taylor, always breaking things and injuring himself and making his grunting sounds, and Wilson, you never got to see his face, and the kids and Jill trying to be the sane voice of reason in that marriage, and Al, his partner, was basically just like Jill, trying to his partner on the show, trying to be the sane voice of reason on their Tool show. And of course they hated Tim hated Bob Vila, and Bob Vila was like Al's idol. Of course, if you don't know Bob Vila, he's from This Old House on PBS, an actual Tool show, which is basically probably where they got the idea from Home Improvement, is like parodying that, and they actually had Bob Vila as himself on the show. The Commish, which I haven't seen in forever. It was one of Marky Foe's favorite shows. He always watched it. It was like a comedy drama. It starred Michael Chiklis as a police commissioner. It lasted 5 seasons for 94 episodes on ABC. And then one more that debuted, which is always think about this one, was Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? It lasted 5 seasons, 295 episodes, and of course was on PBS. And based on the Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego video game series, which was a computer game. I never got to play any of those, but I love that game show. And they would show that sometimes. They show a lot of stuff at school from PBS. That and Reading Rainbow. Oh my God, I can't tell you the amount of times we got to watch Reading Rainbow. It was so fun to watch. Now I'm gonna get that song stuck in my head. I'm just a series of 90s theme songs going in my head of whatever I happen to think about. But one show that was actually ending this month was Classic Concentration on NBC, which of course it had been brought back in 1987. The original Concentration I think was either 50s or 60s, but it was hosted by Alex Trebek. It's where you gotta uncover these numbers. It was basically like the kids' game of match, where you lay out the cards and you got to turn them over and try to match the cards. But also behind them, you unveil pieces of unveil pieces of a puzzle you got to solve, and it's like pictures. And you got to figure out what phrase or sentence it makes. Really great, classic, pardon the pun, game show. But this has been a fun one to do. Sorry again if it takes forever. I always apologize because I take up, if I'm asking you to watch this, I'm taking up a lot of your time, actually, But I'm not sorry. Like I have fun doing this. I hope you guys enjoy this. If you got any comments or suggestions or hate mail, whatever, leave it in the comments wherever you're watching this, Facebook, YouTube, or listen on Spotify. Don't get many people on there, but if you find the episode, or the series and start listening to it, I hope you guys are enjoying it. Next time we're going to be on episode number 65. Man, I've been doing this started this October of 2024, and except for a few weeks of being sick and in the hospital, in the case of when I was off 2 weeks, I do this every week, you know. So anytime I'm not doing it is usually when I've been sick. So hopefully next week we're back here for episode number 65, because I really don't want to get sick again. But anyway, we're going ahead in the future, almost 3 years. We're going to July of 1994. And this is the month or the year I've done the most, because this is the 9th trip through 1994. We're actually almost getting close to a whole year. And once I do, by the way, once I do a full year's worth of a year, I'm going to do one final episode on that year where I look at like the year-end stuff that I don't normally look at, like music, you know, top songs or albums of the year, you know, ratings, what the top shows of the year were, top video games of the year, that type of thing that I normally don't do, because I normally take things month by month. You know, I can do an overview of the year, and I'm not just going to mention, you know, I'm not just going to play clips from all 12 episodes of this, you know. But anyway, that's to come in the future. I don't know when it'll be, because I randomly pick these things. But like I said, 9th trip through 1994. At the time, I was 10 years old and was about to enter the 4th grade and go from terrorizing a bus driver in the 3rd grade to terrorizing a teacher who gave it right back, and then some, Mrs. Weiss, 4th grade. Anyway, thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time.
And now, I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station, for another hideous, hateful haul of horror.